So this is nice. This is not like we're at a corporate conference. It's like we're having a nice chat in my living room, which is what I'm always for. So today we have a collection of different people. So yes, we're at a tech conference, but mostly we'll be looking at the diplomacy and the peace building side of tech. I don't think any of us are truly technical in regards to digital. So we're going to have a nice conversation about the real things that affect peace builders on the ground, because I always think with digital, right, like it's lovely all singing, dancing thing, but digital is just a means of capacity and evidence in work that's on the ground. The people on the ground are the important people, not us that wear suits and go to conferences like this. And that's really important to recognise. So we're going to start on peace tech, and we're going to ask a bit of a general question. So tech outreach, as we all know, can sometimes tie itself up in knots, either using highly technical language or corporate narrative. And like I found this myself when I was doing the research for my book and writing different policies for governments around the world, that like if you look at most open data portals, or nearly every open data portal, you will be thinking they're corporate entities in their own right. And you don't have to be a brain scientist to realize that's a problem. So obviously, if you're a third sector activist, if you're looking at something, or an activist in general, and you go, well, this isn't for me because the language and etc. But that is highly damaging because, as we all know, open data is a fantastic tool for capacity building, funding, and evidencing the great work that people do in the communities. Now, with peace tech, I think this is actually more important because peace builders, for the most part, they're a bit less tech savvy. I apologize, but we are. And if peace tech isn't accessible, I always say it's pointless. It is literally, there's no point to it if it's not accessible. So obviously it's a new field. We have a real opportunity to create a narrative that is human-centric, human-based, and getting the narrative right for peace builders. So for the most important thing, they actually bloody use it instead of just like looking at it. So my question is to you guys. What do you think makes sense to peace builders in regards to digital tools so they can get on with the really important stuff, community development? And I'm going to start with Tobias, and we'll go around in a circle.
Well, when we talk about the needs of peace builders, it's very important to acknowledge that we can't assume them. We need to engage with the peace builders, talk about their actual needs in the field. Mostly they're not techie people like we. Obviously, I don't share a techie institution, but what we do, we engage with a lot of peace builders. We do a lot of trainings with people like from around the globe, and we get the feedback what they actually need, and we can communicate those needs. I think it's very important to talk to the peace builders actually. And well, it's about the use of digital to make their work in an often very difficult environment more easier. And well, tech initiatives and also the government well definitely should reach out to organizations like ours who belong to the peace building community. But which are engaged already in the field of peace tech and should make use of us, and we will be very happy to do so because we do have access to the different NGOs which tech initiatives or also the government might not be able to. And it's very important, like to bring tech and peace building together. We do it, for example, at our yearly conference, where we will devote a whole session to map out Austria's vision for peace tech. And most importantly is to make the outcomes of such sessions available, and that's what we will do in an open access way.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much, Nathan, for inviting and opening such an important section of the world having the voice from the Global South. When we talk about the peace stack and the communities there in the ground, there are several challenges in terms of the tech as well, originating from the countries where tech or technologies or the access to the technologies has been very limited. And sometimes governments and states often close and the button to have the access to the technologies. And even the communities that are there, to be very honest, peace stack being a new field, but at the same time, peace building has been in the continuation based on the communities' ways of their own indigenous way of building up the peace building, and their own models and stuff like that. But only the challenge has remained that those communities do not have the access and reach to the tech. For example, easy access or safe access to the internet, for example. And over the time period, what I've witnessed has been that the peace stack or the technologies has been remain primarily English-based, for example. And many of the people there, for example, in Balochistan or in in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in different parts of the Afghanistan, for example, or India, in different parts of the world, regions, where the communities do not understand English language. And since we over-emphasizing on the language, has also remained a big challenge. And we have been witnessing that happening because this has created a lot of disconnect between what Global North and Global South has been doing. And since what is important is that at the same time, the challenge to the peace stack has been that we need not to over-theorize the entire field, but what we need is that we need to work on the tools that are accessible, that are understandable, that are easily, access in a sense that they can build on, rather than create further challenges for those people who are there at the ground or communities who are trying to build peace around. What I truly believe is that we do not need to forget that primarily to get the Global South along in our forward-looking approach in Global North. As we were discussing that, I would not really like to divide the things, but it has been creating a divide that has been existing over the time period. So what I really like to emphasize here is that creating an understanding of the communities and building that wisdom to the research or approaches that we are building currently in the peace stack. And I think that importance of that peace stack lab or something, that initiative that you are and many other colleagues who are sitting at the panel are using, is that to plug those things around so that you can have a more inclusive approaches of building back. Yeah.
Fantastic. Marcus?
Yeah, Nathan. So it's a broad question that you started off with, and I'm gonna even make it broader than that, perhaps. If I invite anyone in the audience, think about what peace is actually to you, and I'd venture to say that each of you would probably come up with a different understanding of peace. It could be something like peace between states. What is actually a peace between states? Is that simply that there is no armed confrontation, or are those actually relations of friendship? Is peace something about all of humanity? So let's say when we think about space and we explore space, perhaps in future far space and all of that, and we do that together as humanity. Is that peace, perhaps for some of you? Is peace something in a very, very local environment, somewhere in a neighborhood? Could be a neighborhood in Vienna, could be one in any other city of the world. Is peace something that has something to do with states, so that nations are at peace with one another, and so on and so forth? And the only reason why I invite you to think about these things is because my persuasion is that when we think about tech peace, that it's really about all of this. So for me, tech peace is not just the peace building in say a local environment. I think that's a very, very important part of it. But I think it's so much more than that. And in order to make that clearer to a broader audience, in order to who may ask, okay, what's the point about this tech piece? So in any kind of those examples that I've given to you now, tech obviously plays a major role. So if it's about nuclear weapons between states, well, they're being modernized as we speak, and modernized obviously with all kinds of tech gadgets, artificial intelligence, which amongst other things is going to shorten the time windows to respond to attacks. So nuclear accidents and everything probably going to become more likely. So that's on the one hand. And if you look in very local environments, on the other hand, peace building exercises, say my own research centers on the Horn of Africa at the moment. If you look at Sudan at the moment, if you look at South Sudan, for instance, if you look at Somalia, then there too is something to be done. Yeah, and Renata talked a little bit about that, and we're going to explore that further. So that too is tech peace. And when we talk about tech peace, then we obviously always have to keep in mind that most people probably don't, or experts at least, probably don't talk about tech peace. Yeah? They talk about other things. Yeah? So there is the corporate model that Renata highlighted. There are obviously, there's realpolitik, so the old style great power politics. And I think that will be my answer to your question, precisely because it is so important, and because actually, comparatively speaking, not all that much is happening. Really have to highlight what the virtues of tech peace are. And to some extent, there's actually no alternative, given the times that we live in, that we take tech peace very seriously.
Thank you, Renata.
Yes, so to me, peace tech is completely away from the Silicon Valley logic of development of tech. It is not driven by profit and it's not driven by efficiencies. And it is not a race to which is faster and more like, leading the market, but it is something very different. It is collective and is in constant iteration and reinvention. And it is also something that cannot be developed by two developers in a garage thinking that they want to change the world. It's a political process, actually. And it's a political process that needs to, in which governance cannot be an afterthought. Governance as a governance and the power conversation has to start in the same design room, where, in the ideation room where the technology is being discussed, as well as sustainability. And once the process is completed, those conversations cannot happen, after the flashy launch and the early adoption of the tool. It's a lesson that we learned the hard way, because we had so many projects over 20 years that were started by a idealistic civic tech developer, and then were adopted by many people, and then nobody could maintain them because they were developing very complex languages, development languages, and they were money ran out. So it is different in that way. It is also, the inclusion has to be intentional. It has to be from day one. It is actually the conversations that happen before the features are decided. The conversations about not only the governance, the purpose, and how it's going to be deployed need to be taken collectively. And often we have seen it in some AI projects connected to democracy. It's lots of frictions involved that need to be cleared in the room ahead of its deployment. It is also highly interdisciplinary. And you mentioned the complexity of language. Now we have always, in our tech teams, when we are developing something, a journalist that is helping us a lot, because it's a journalist with no tech background. So she's like, what do you mean with this? all the time, and tries to find synonyms and ways to explain people in plain language what we are trying to do with the technology, instead of, getting the people to speak the tech jargon. It has to have a mechanism for participation and input, not only at the, usually I have seen it so many times that Peace Tech is the first opportunity for people who are not tech developers to interact with it is when they are testing, when it's already like the beta. What for, you just want me to approve your way of thinking that this can be solved? And usually it's, okay, it runs, it works, but the participation has to be like far before, and it cannot stop with the release of the app. It has to be like, or the technological solution. It has to be a constant dialogue, and it has to be, again, intentionally designed, the mechanism of participation. And what happens if there's any data relationship in that beforehand, it has to be decided. And after, it has to be communicated clearly. And if changes are made, it has to be also communicated clearly. And I think that we need to think of Peace Tech projects completely differently. When you think of budgets, for example, usually, you get the budget for the developers and the UX and all of that. But this very, precious time that you invest in talking to people is never recognized, And we assume many times that civil society will have, all the time in this world and all the space to give time to your baby tech project, And it's not the case. We have learned with the communities that if we include them meaningfully and we value their time and recognize their efforts early on, the project and the results might take longer and might not be as sophisticated as expected by the developers, but might be adopted and embraced as something that it doesn't come top-down or from outside, but belongs to a broader community that is going to maintain it. We need to involve local and involve youth. A proven project of that is the SICAN that powers open data portals that the Open Knowledge Foundation co-created with governments when they were early exploring open data. It hasn't changed much. It's still going 20 years ago, from 20 years. So it was not perfect and didn't consider many of these things, but it was not developed alone in a dev room. So those are my initial thoughts on inclusion.
Great, yeah. I always say about Peace Tech, I mean, this is buzzword, isn't it? let's not beat around the bush. But anything that shines a light on peace is always a good thing. But where I personally believe Peace Tech should be really looking is at civic technology. And, civic tech is really good at activating communities. One of the first times I heard about the Open Knowledge Foundation, for example, was Code for Deutschland. And I went to a pub in Munster, it's very posh, and everyone was talking about, what was in their water, parking around the local city. And these weren't like government people. These were just activists, normal people who weren't techie or whatever. That's what I want for Peace Tech. And, I think that Peace Tech should be echoing everything that you guys have just said. Peace Tech should be looking at those communities who are doing it right instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. And we don't need to. There's a great collective of people around the world, and we'll talk about that later. Right, let's move on to the next question. So we're going to talk about human-centric data governance in AI. So I'm going to throw some data at you. MIT analysis of over 4,000 data sets stated that 90% of data that trains AI comes from Europe or North America, with 4% coming from Africa. And I'm just using Africa as an example here. I know we have people on the panel from different parts of the world. I'm being a bit journalistic and naughty. And then we want to kind of match that with the last global conflict distribution sample, which stated that 4% of conflicts happened in Europe, with 43% happening in Africa. And again, you don't have to be a political science or a data science to see what the problem is there. It's broken. Or as we say in the Black Country, it's bossed. So talking about AI for peace building, I am still not there yet. I'm still, to be convincing, not like I need convincing. But I think it's fair to say, with those kind of data collection issues and the things that happen with like the social cultures of data, I think that's a problem. So I'm really sorry to ask you this. This is a very loaded question, but what do you think we need to do to fix that? I'm going to start with you, Renata, then we're going to come back to Tobias.
Well, I think that is more than fixing, it is rethinking the issue, because it's not only about data availability, but what's at stake. I have worked with many communities that understand the importance of having their own data, but they do not want to share it. It's like if we share where, our most valuable, for example, resources are, or if we share too much information about our biodiversity, big pharma will come here and get everything they want, and then we will be left with nothing. Same-wise, communities, and I think of, for example, indigenous communities in Guatemala, they're quite reluctant of digitizing because they think that digitizing some of the things of their data makes them more vulnerable for extraction and yet another cycle of expropriation. And then we have the problem of data quality as well. There has not been enough inclusion when designing data standards of the missing data sets, basically, of the missing communities there. So the standards are decided top-down, then a community collects data according to their own rules, and then it is not usable for the purposes that the current data-thirsty actors want it to. So I think that we need to establish a new global social contract around data, identify the areas where we could collaborate globally to provide more data and share more data in equitable terms. I think, for example, key information about changes in our planet, absolutely missing, is an absolute data blind spot in the most affected countries. And we need to connect better, like low-tech devices and offline devices to data collection points. And again, it has to be a fair relationship. And again, the governance issue, a fair relationship when I'm sharing my data, epidemiological data or whatever data that I'm sharing from the Global South. And it has to be like more, I think there's an excellent opportunity and collaboration towards that high-value digital commons, high-value data sets that countries that have the ability to do so contribute in funding for the data collection, but it's a shared resource that others can, take advantage of. A lot of work to do, a lot of experimentation to do to show how it works, but big faith that we can make it work because we need it. It's not optional. We need to do it in the next 5 years.
Preach.
Well,
okay. No, you go. It's fine. You go.
Okay. Well, if we have an obvious bias in our data, because most of the data is coming from the non-global north, first thing we need to do is to acknowledge the bias and be very cautious about it. Well, there's a lot of things Western data doesn't get right in general, especially when it comes to cultural norms, but also, like it was mentioned before, language. It's a very important point, like from the peace-building perspective. Well, in general, if we use everything, we use digital in the field of peace-building, we need to ensure it adds value, or at least it does no harm. That should be the golden rule. At least do nothing bad with it. That should be the number one rule. And I think if we rely on Western data too much, it won't work at the end. Like, we need to support other areas, like to have their own path. I think empowerment is definitely the key on a longer term.
Wunderbar. Marcus.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to on the one hand, if one thinks about, say, peace building, artificial intelligence, then one could actually do a lot of things. So conflict analysis could, in theory, be improved tremendously. Early warning systems could be created. So, say with language, so abusive language being used, say, okay, then violence more likely to happen. Monitoring also in more traditional ways, so in line with my perhaps very broad understanding of peace tech, right? But if, let's say, there's a peacekeeping operation in the old days, interposition force, now you could do that. You could do a lot of that with drones and all of that. There are opportunities for deliberation. There's perhaps even opportunities for transitional justice, new ones. Yeah, but obviously, always with this grain of salt that has been mentioned by everyone thus far. Yeah, so that's the data, and obviously, if the data come predominantly from the global north, then we have a problem. This, by the way, is nothing that's particularly new. Yeah, so in my field, political science, conflict studies, and everything, in the 1960s, there was a strive towards quantification, so running regression analyses and everything. Yeah, and there, the data that they used were basically all the European wars, yeah, Napoleonic wars, First World War, Second World War. So that resulted also in a highly biased understanding of conflict. So, for instance, conflicts happening within states, they basically dropped by the wayside. No one talked about them. Yeah. And we really have to be aware of this problem. Yeah. And one more caveat about that, obviously, so gathering data in authoritarian environments is a difficult thing to do too. Yeah, so in principle, yes, much more data should come from the global south, but that bears certain risks for some people.
Yeah. I mean, this is very important question when you are actually training data on primarily 90% of the data is coming from the global north, and you're trying to solve the problems and challenges and try to understand the challenges of the global south. Is primarily, for me, it becomes unjust to understand something which is coming from the global north and you are implementing that to understand the challenges there in global south. Let me put the context there in South Asia primarily, where more of the challenges that we are witnessing. Imagine that you're trying to use an AI tool that has given you a data from global north, and you have, per se, understanding about the policing and data understanding. But you're trying to understand, for example, conflict there in Balochistan or there in any part of the South Asian perspective, South Asian region. It will not primarily understand the grievances on the ground. It will give you perspective that is being a biased understanding of the subject. And the data is primarily would be different in a sense that it will not understand the deep-rooted community reconciliation processes or challenges, or for instance, the data or AI narratives won't give you the understanding of how Jirga works, for example, how Panchayat system in Punjab works, or how the challenges are there in the community. So primarily what I've been witnessing and understanding is that there is a need for being cautious about putting what I would like to say that it becomes more like another form of colonialism where you are trying to impose your own understanding, your own bias, data bias on the other communities or trying to build that. So it's primarily what we can do is that to challenge the idea that your AI is not just global, it should be local. We need to rethink, as other panelists has also said. So one project that we try to inculcate, and my friends there working in the peace building process is there in the ground, they try to understand how the Urdu language or the language there and translate that into different languages so that, people might understand the context. When you are not understanding the context through the language, I mean, you are actually missing the entire essence of understanding how you build peace. And I think that peace building processes over the time period have missed the understanding of the language. So when you are English speaking and you are not understanding the context, then you are missing the entire context, for example. So the importance is that to build those community validation mechanisms so that you understand those contexts and better understand and build peace. And another thing is that you need to build the data's dignity primarily based on the community resilience and community, how the community can give you access to their own data, for example. And then, of course, building and primarily coming from the context of South Asia, which has only had their own inheritance of colonialism. Then, we've been got the independence from the 75 years ago. But at the same time, how that colonialism process is. And then another colonialism that you are building on further through the process of digital ways. So I think that we can prevent these, we cannot prevent it, but we can build this in a way that to have the conscious or understanding about how we will be able to translate our understanding and accept the other's understanding and sharing of the information. This will help us to be more inclusive and shape the way that conflict resolution or peace-building processes can be more inclusive and more sustainable, what I believe is that.
Very important. I'm going to go on a bit of a rant now. Yeah. Sorry, you've set me off for that. So, especially when we're talking about data bias, and we all know this, data bias isn't just about, different parts of the world. It's sexist, it's racist, and unfortunately, data reflects society, and unless society changes, I hope that happens, but it's a really hard one to address. And now we have to account for peace building. And what does data really actually mean? So it can really mean anything, basically. For example, there are complete and utter cultural norms in different countries that work within peace building. South Sudan, for example, it is incredibly taboo to even take a photo. So, and again, so if you're talking about building AI models for peace, then there's a lot of questions to answer there. And I think unless we start to base that data on local data, as you said, then it's something that we really need to be aware of. So, moving on. Data sovereignty. I know you're very excited about this, Tobias. Yeah? So data sovereignty is the idea that communities should control how their data is collected, stored, and used. And this kind of feeds into the last question, because if we're relying on Western-centric data, we risk creating a disconnect between peace tech tools and the actual real-world concepts that affect peace builders, like local languages, cultural norms, etc. The important stuff, basically. Not the people writing the code, it's the people on the ground. So from a peace-building perspective, how can we include local communities in shaping and owning the data that affects it? I'm going to mix it up a bit. And Marcus, would you like to go first?
Yes, I'm happy to go first. Let me start again with a caveat there, right? With the term data sovereignty. Sovereignty is something that originates in Roman private law. And in 1648, Peace of Westphalia, then the state system was born, and with the principle of sovereignty, like in the Roman private law, ab inferis usque ad coelum, yeah, from the heavens to hell. So everything, you own this piece of land, everything above it and everything underneath it. So this is the one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is the kind of very, very networked world in which we are living in now. So this is the tension there, yeah, with the data sovereignty. And one could go further into this question. What is it if we live, say, in Europe? European Union basically means pooled sovereignty. What does data sovereignty mean with the pooled sovereignty? But I don't want to bore you more with these questions about so these ultimately legal questions there. Yeah. So obviously data ownership is something that's very important. Yeah, and there are probably technical questions involved and there are political questions involved. Technical questions means that so how can my data of other people actually be protected? how perhaps in an authoritarian environment can my identity be concealed? How can my communication perhaps be encrypted so that nothing is gonna happen to me? And then on the political side, to some extent, I think we're back to what Renata called the big actors in her talk. Yeah, so on the national level, already quite a challenge for communities, for individuals. In authoritarian systems, obviously, even more than in democratic ones. And if one wanted to think big about them, one probably would have to go on the international level. And there it's obviously very, very complicated and difficult. Yeah? So kind of regulation that we have there very much in its infancy. Global Digital Compact, there's a little something. Yeah? It's a compact, it's basically a declaration.
Very good. Renata, would you like to go next?
Well, I have a rather practical example that is close to home here. I mean, to your home. Together with the International Press Institute, we are doing an experimental digital sovereignty project. We want to create the Press Freedom Commons. So basically, they have 70 years of unstructured data, undigitized, on most of the, freedom of expression incidents since the 50s. And it is a beauty, like they own the rights on the data set, on the collection of data, but it is also data from members. So we not only have this bunch of data, but we have the data of all the IPI members. And what we want to come up with, it is a model to design a different way of governing an archive as a digital commons and assert some sovereignty, so not only put it online and share with everyone, because we know what happens with, we know that there's beautiful key missing data sets of a unique perspective on how censorship and censorship surveillance limitations of freedom took place, as the world entered a decolonization phase, and historical, it is, I cannot describe how valuable this data will be to feed the systems. But we want to condition that access, of course. We want to assert, to design a way where someone in a government could understand, okay, this data set is telling me, combined with the local AI models, is telling me that this legislative change that is happening in my country happened in all of these countries and escalated later in this direction. But we want a company like OpenAI. We don't want them to take advantage of that data set without, not only paying back, without assuring, not only a payback, but ethical uses and sustainability and so on. So I think that, digital sovereignty needs not to be just a talk. We need to show examples on how it operates, and it cannot be only at the top levels of government in, yet investing in that and yet another, supercomputer in Europe. It has to be translated in these community way, different community ways of understand the value that we have and leverage the game a little bit, and not by adopting closeness, but conditional access. And conditional access for unconditional access for public interest, conditional access for corporate gain, and play the game there. And the interesting thing of this project is that we want to set the base for a federated press freedom data commons. So if, for example, the Inter-American Association of Press or another archive of IFEX or other Amnesty want to federate the data sets, they can have their own rules, but we can have a very rich data set that will inform the AI systems that now lack not only information from the South. I think that it lacks a lot of information of our past. So Yeah.
Can I just come in there as well? Because, you know, we have our issues about data, but it is also incredibly liberating, and especially when there's real lessons that come from data journalism and journalists and the actual work that they do. There's one project that I think is probably one of the most amazing open data projects I've ever seen. It's IDSF25. So basically, the Balkan Investigative Journalist Network got hold of data when they built Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia. And it's some weird place, like, no offense if you're from there, but like it looks like Las Vegas, and so much money was spent on that, and obviously that was taking the money out of services and public services and whatever, just for some like rant. And that changed everything in the country. Like, you know, a bunch of activists, a bunch of journalists, and that is the power. So yeah, we can talk about the problems with it, but also it's incredibly amazing what you can do if you have the right tools. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Nathan. We were discussing about the data and sovereignty, of course. When we rely more on the data that is coming from the Western-centric data sets and data centers, so I think that, in my opinion, we actually undermine the very legitimacy of the peace-building processes. We need to be honest here, because as a conflict-affected community and region like Pakistan, India, and South Asia, we are dealing with the legacies of violence, war, and there are displacements, of course, there are mistrusts, there are communities that are neglected by the states most of the time. So we are understanding, and the community's understanding of the peace processes and justice is different from what the states are thinking, and of course what the data centers are building on. So we are, it is also based on their own contextualized way of realities of understanding of themselves. And of course, when we predict, we try to understand or support them, for instance, we build in a very genuine way of helping them, but at the same time, what we are unable to understand is that sometimes your genuine understanding or genuine support system sometimes becomes more biased. Sometimes that also happens. So, so over the time period, what we have witnessed is that there's a disconnect of the people on the ground and on those who are deciding. For example, imagine a government or a state institution building a policy framework based on the data set coming from a Western-centric. Most of the time, those countries rely on data sets that coming from the Western-centric data centers. So at the same time, they're building the risk of not understanding and recognizing the, for example, caste-based exclusions or informal militias or gender-based dimensions that are they're very much embedded in the countries like in South Asia. So those structural injustices are the real, but at the same time, this can create a lot of consequences for our decision-making in the processes or the policy-making. For example, at the Institute of Peace and Diplomatic Studies, where we are studying, we have encountered various examples over the time period where community leaders in the FATA region, for example, on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, where the community leaders in those areas question the usefulness of early warning system, for example. We use the early warning systems for floods or any calamities that might happen. But at the same time, their way of understanding or their way of local indigenous way of early warning system is different from what we scientifically or based on our models that we try to implement on those communities. So we also need not only to understand the data set that we are doing, but at the same time we need to have representatives or people who are coming from the ground, connect yourself with those people and then invite them. Or you can also visit them and sit down with them and talk to them in a way that they maybe empathize or connect with you, for example, or the local partners that you can build on. But at the same time, these models often miss those kind of connections with the communities. So primarily what we need to do is that, as I mentioned that about the connecting with the community, without understanding or building the data which is primarily what we are discussing is about AI or tech and everything. But data is there existing in the communities. You only need to scratch and build and connect plug your entire research processes and work that you're doing there. So for example, participatory approach of data sets. Why not? So these kind of things can be done in a way that to model and make it more sustainable way of approaching how you are dealing with the peace or conflict way of conflict resolution processes. Otherwise, what we are witnessing is that these data sets which are techie and data sets which are community-based will be a disconnect. And I think that it's a place where we can think about or rethink how to connect those techie data sets or sets there existing in the communities so that you can build on. Otherwise, we will continue having these conversations and the solutions might not be reaching it.
That is so important as well because, I mean, again, the narrative of the data and how they can use the data as well because they already have it. And as a really good example in Birmingham, where I'm from, the local community was using crime data because of the area in Balsall Heath where it is, and without that connection, change wouldn't happen. So that is so important. Thank you so much, Tobias.
Well, let me just echo on that what Renata mentioned earlier. Building trust is so crucial in this aspect, and building trust is always key in peace building, which means in the context of peace tech. Not only building peace in the institution or the individuals working for the institution, like in the field, but also building trust in the digital tools. And to gain such trust, we need to engage a lot in many different ways and be very transparent about the values that digital tools can bring. But we also need to be very transparent what happens with the data we're generating. And if we engage in such an open and transparent way, I think on a longer term this will also have positive effects in the fields of data control and transparency with data in general.
Wunderbar, vielen Dank. So we have 2 questions left. So we're going to look at global perspectives now. I think we've kind of talked about this quite a bit, and I'm really happy about how the conversation went because it's exactly how I wanted it to go. We've been talking about the real things and not about all the techie nonsense. Right, so I'm going to try and be as nicely as I can, and please forgive me for being a little bit mischievous with my choice of words, but in regards to training peace-building AI, again, we need to be more inclusive of our thinking, from supporting better data usership, for funding data collection outside of our borders, and I'm looking at you, European Union. I know you've got to be a diplomat, so you just smile and look. But when we get that data, how can we better integrate those perspectives into our strategies and digital governance models that meaningfully support peace builders on the ground? So, we've had these conversations already. We've talked about the problems, and let's just kind of think in a kind of a perfect world now. So if we actually had that data, how are we actually going to use it? Because again, with data spaces, and especially around the AIT that we talk about, data spaces, there's a lot of data out there, but how do we get it to the right people? So let's say if we had those data spaces and put them into perspective. So I'm going to start, with Tobias first, if that's okay, mate.
Well, very important question, and I think we need to stay humble here. We don't need always to invent the wheel. More often, other geographics might be better at certain things, and sometimes as Westerners or as Austrians, we're better off as supporting actors. I think humbleness is a key. We don't have to be the front runner in every aspect. And as I say, more often a supporting role can be very suitable, and just let people know we're there, what tools we can offer, and we're there to help them if they want. But be aware that they might be further ahead in certain under certain circumstances or in certain aspects. Yes. Stay humble.
Stay humble. That's a good brag. But that's important because, like Tobias says, that we're not the expert in a lot of these issues. They're the expert. And it's about amplifying their voices. So.
Yeah, and I think this is very important questions for how can we plug the grassroots to the global community of the conversation. Often what happens is that when all the frameworks are done, all the data or all the innovations are done, then we are the latecomers. Global South is added at the late. Okay, come along. Let's have the conversation now. So the problem is that since we are the late stakeholders, so not the true partners in design, in the process, in the innovation. So why not we begin where the first step may be that, okay, thank you, Nathan. You have invited me as a Global South voice. This is the first step in the conversation that we need to begin with. So I think that this is IDSF. Thank you for inviting the Global South voices. And this is something that we can do differently. And then not only doing less inviting, of course, asking them to showing up, for example, and inviting in a way that to be meaningful. For example, people in, say, Quetta, Colombo, in Karachi, in Islamabad, in Kabul, in different parts of the world. So inviting them, not primarily pushing them to understand more of English narrative or subjects. Why not learning the language and building that bridge and building that technological differences through the language as well, which is I am primarily promoting or encouraging people who are sitting around here to build on, because these are something that can help you in building your own resources of understanding and your getting the depth of the frameworks that you will be building. And of course, the European actors or Global North actors too, in terms of engagement and in terms of building the more localized approaches, what is important is that to build the community on the building the memory of the communities. Not just we are in 2025, but also the background history and understanding of the communities as well. And since you can integrate the Global South, but at the same time, you need to measure the understanding through, of course, the Global North tools that has been built over the years. I'm not questioning them. I'm just only questioning the connect between the South and North in a way that to get it more meaningfully. And one of the most important support is that is about the funding, which is very core. So primarily, the funding or support needs to be not in the terms of grants, but what I would like to propose here is that to build a co-authorship or co-ownership of the initiatives that you do here in different labs, Peace Tech labs or research centers that you do. This will create more inclusive approaches of not only granting something to do, but also bringing the ownership to the communities and helping you out in innovating the tools that you're building here in these centers and labs. And finally, what I would really encourage the colleagues here is to have more humility, as we had earlier discussed, that recognizing the digital governance is not about to solve problems in Global North, but it also builds the trust. It is also based on how you are building the trust and creating the ways or tools to remove the misinformation, because Global South has their own biases towards the data sets that are built. So why not building the trust between the two, where the technological innovation is happening and when we are at the receiving end. And so this way, I think that the source of innovation and building up can happen. And this is the way I think that solidarity of the shared approach and shared design can happen between the communities and where the labs are there. So I think that this way we can not only share risk, we can also share future, we can also build and share the power of resolving the conflicts through that way. It's not only those states who are behaving in a different manner, not democratic or democratic, but at the end is that there are communities who are at the receiving end. So why not those communities who are building here the innovation can connect through that? So I think these are a few of the things that I would like to contribute.
Wunderbar, vielen Dank.
I think that there are really three critical questions. The first one is, what is peace? Second one is, how do I get there? And the third one is, how can digital help? And if I just get at that and just break it down to the level of peace building, to the local communities. Yeah. So what is peace? I would hope that this answer, but that answer has to come then from the community who has a stake in the peace. Yeah. I would hope that that answer would be within, say, a UN frame. Yeah. So that is basically about restraints and the use of force. A fair compromise, meeting somewhere in the middle between conflict parties, and deliberation, inclusivity, a multi-stakeholder approach. The second one, how do we get there? There are a lot of traditional conflict resolution mechanisms. Some of them are actually very interesting, and they are much more innovative than we think they are. Yeah? So let's say in northern Uganda, there's this mechanism that's called disentanglement. And for those of you who have been here before, watching the quantum, now this is really complicated science. Yeah? Disentanglement, of course, is an entanglement. Disentanglement are important concepts there. Yeah? Think about it. So if it's about disentangling conflicts, that means that conflicts have lots of different layers, lots of different actors. So there is no root cause then. So in that thinking, the UN is wrong. Yeah? There's no root cause. There's not just one thing, let's say the quarrel about the minerals or whatever, but there are lots of layers of conflicts. There may be the minerals, but there can also be the outside interveners. There can be greedy politicians, and all of that makes for the conflict and makes the conflict sustain. And the third, how can the digital help? Now, with my example about the entanglement, disentanglement, it probably could help a lot. Yeah. So in terms of conflict analyses, you could actually look at that. But note that conflict analysis is not what is in the Western textbooks about analyzing conflicts. Yeah. What is in the Western textbooks is the root cause, and with that also in the UN. So it's a different way of saying it's definitely learning from both sides. But if we are talking about peace building in a community somewhere in the Global South, then it's obviously that community in the Global South that ought to have the ownership of that process.
Well, thank you very much, Renata.
Well, I think that we need a cultural shift. There's a high tolerance for risk and failure when we are talking about business and tech and new tech and AI. There's a very low tolerance for failure when a peace tech project is funded, for example. It didn't go the way that it was planned, or it was, I don't know, it was not the magic solution that someone sitting in the central office might have thought of. I think that when we think of the peace tech journey, the journey itself is full of valuable lessons, and it has to be encouraged that, okay, if the disclosure of the failures, and the learning from the failures, and I think that that's something, at least in my experience, I haven't seen much. Being transparent about, within the boundaries of the communities that you work with, of the things that didn't go well, and the learning process and the points that you should have done differently. And also be prepared of flexibility and experimentation and different allocation of resources than from traditional projects. I think that will give people on the ground completely more flexibility and more convenient environment for innovation. One of the things that actually I disagree with Farhad is that the Global South is latecomer when we talk about peace tech, because in my experience, what I have seen, at least in the region that I'm more familiar with in Latin America, we have been innovators with lean tech, highly interactive community practices that have delivered good. And then many approaches have been shared north and south. So the other recommendation is we need more south-south and north-south interactions and exchanges. And that comes only with good documentation. So it has to be like a part of the way that we design the projects. It has to be framed and funded in a way that the learnings and the outcomes of the project can be reused, reshared, localized, repurposed. I think that documentation, we always fail in not only in tech projects, but in everything on documentation. And it's such a vital piece in the work that we do. And lastly, I think that we need to think of peace tech projects as 20% about tech, 80% about the rest. I have seen many super sophisticated peace tech projects that neglect the rest, and the rest is where the community comes and is where the effects are going to take place. The last thing I think that is also recognizing the power imbalances. When we think about peace and conflict, I think that North and South ordinary citizens have much more in common in conflict, and the experience of conflict within, all the, of course, considering all the economic and social differences, hit in similar ways. Mother in Guatemala than a mother is victim of a conflict here in Europe or in Asia. So I think that there's a lot of commonality. So bridges are needed, and rethinking on the way that we involve people outside the tech circles is urgent.
That's wonderful. We're coming to an end now. We're running out of time. As I thought, they wouldn't get to ask our last question, but I think we've answered that, because the last question was going to look at how can peace builders lead tech in policy. And today we've talked about community-driven, human-centric design a lot. And I couldn't have asked for a better panel of people. I've had absolutely fantastic time. And thank you so much for everything you said. Now, please stay on stage, because we have a small announcement now. I would like to invite Mr. Helmut Leopold and Mr. Philipp Ogotnes onto the stage, please. Don't look shocked. Okay, so this kind of makes sense now. So we've been having a conversation all day about human-centric design, how we can get people, peace builders at NGOs to design the agenda. So it's actually fit for purpose. Again, if peace tech isn't accessible, it isn't fit for purpose. And this is why we like to announce the Peace Tech Alliance here at the Austrian Austrian Institute of Technology better, but the Austrian Centre of Peace is also a supporter. And we also have Renata, who is a supporter from the Open Knowledge Foundation, Marcus, a supporter from the Diplomatic Academy, and we also have Uni Graz, IIP, and University of Innsbruck. So I am chuffed, and I couldn't think of a better place for the Peace Tech Alliance to be. And I'll pass you on to my lovely colleagues who'd like to say a few words. Philipp. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nate. It's been an honor to see this evolve. In my previous function, I tried to help it. I think there are the two key words that I picked up. The first is low tech. So we need more to focus on low tech than on high tech in order to allow more people to be part of this. We all know this genius payment systems with non-smartphones where people can exchange a couple of euros or in the local currency and having to do with the herds or with the crops or something very normal. As I'm sure technology people can figure out how to get data via low-tech, and not always either the highest technology. So that's the first one. And the second one is about cutting out the middleman, I would say. So cutting out the big monopolies of data. This needs to stop. And we need to be self-aware, also everybody around the world, that this is our data, or each of us, this is our data. And we don't give it for free, like we do now. We all share pictures on Facebook and everything, yeah? And then somebody else does something with it, and then sells us back the product. So this needs to stop. So these are the two key elements that I would add. And if we manage to in this alliance to go in the way, and then get also the institutional players in, the EU, and there are so many people around. There are UN missions, there are the EU missions, there are development organizations all around. So if we can make it part, getting this data, but in that way that the ownership stays where it is, where it belongs, and we manage to use them, then we will develop better products, and then we will be able to do something meaningful in the terms of peace building. So that's all I wanted to say.
And
I'm glad that it's going.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Helmut.
Yeah, let me add at this point a thought or an important message. It's also a pleasure to be on the stage to say such messages, which I would like to share with you. I'm strongly believe in it. I usually will come to the point we need budget, we need huge organizations, otherwise we cannot build something, not solve something. At the end, of course, we need budget and we need competent and powerful companies. But at the end, everything starts at the end. It starts always with people. And for me at the moment, there is not, for such initiative, not a need for a budget, because what should be solved, what should we address? So bring together, so I thank here in advance all the supporters that basically we spend our time of experts on the digital side, which is our role, IT experts, what I have is my team, user experts, peace, policy making experts, whatever it is. Let us sit together and think and discuss a little bit, what do we want to achieve, what building blocks are available, where can we start something. So basically, let us start to discuss how we can improve the world. There it starts. And then we will find out opportunities where we have to go one step further, and then we will find budgets and funding for sure. That's not really the problem. So here we would like to say we start with this field, jumping now in the low-tech area, discussing how can we improve these processes by adapting or using low-tech, but also let us jump in the high-tech. We have after the lunch then our GAIX session on data spaces. How do we deal with data sharing on the globe? How do we deal with open data? Very crucial topics. So let us combine what do we need? Policy making, regulation, but also technical solutions where we know everything in the world. We have not to travel, but when we sit together, we know everything. So thank everybody for supporting us, and we are also inviting here everybody to support us. It's a non-profit oriented, there's no business model behind it, organization. We create a project that we start to exchange ideas, views, approaches to create something, and then we do the next step. I think that's it. Right?
Vielen Dank. So keep an eye on the website in the next couple of weeks, more content will be going on there, and I can't wait to get started and working on making Peace Tech more of a collaborative community design thing, not so much about the suits. This will be the last time you see me in a suit. Okay. So could we just get a photo together, guys, in front of the thing, and then we'll let you go.
And please give a big round of applause for this panel. Thank you very much to all panelists.